Hello viewers, you are watching QTV, the Gambia's first private TV station, and we're broadcasting live from Australia on Canada and it's now time for a weekly State of Affairs program. Well, the 29th UN Climate Conference has ended in Baku, Azerbaijan, where it brought together world leaders, of course, policymakers, scientists, activists, civil society to discuss urgent climate issues, including funding mechanisms, adaptation strategies, and emission reduction. Well, joining me this week on the State of Affairs program, I'm joined by Dr. Famara K. Damfa, who's joining us from Minnesota in the United States of America. He's a lead scientist and center director of the Natural Capital Project, of course, known as the Art Economic Models at the University of Minnesota's Department of Applied Economics. He is also a senior climate change consultant for the World Bank and the founding executive director for Household Disaster Relief Project, the Gambia, known as Help Gambia, a registered national climate-driven non-profit. Dr. Damfa also represents the Gambia and 45 least developed countries as lead negotiator on adaptation matters, including leading the national adaptation matters, including the national adaptation plans agenda item. Well, also on the program, we are joined by Babukar Nyang, who is joining us live from Dakar, the capital of Senegal. Actually, Nyang also led the Climate Action Network Africa team to the COP 29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, to demand for climate finance and justice by asking polluters to pay. And in the studio here on Kairaba Avenue, I am joined by Alaye Soare, a Gambian journalist and environmental activist. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining me on the program this week. I will start with you, both Famara and Babukar. When you were heading to Baku, could you share with us what were your expectations from COP29? I will start with you, Dr. Damfa.
Well, thank you very much, Ali, for the opportunity to share with the Gambian audience and beyond. Heading to Baku, we expect COP29 to be the finals COP, which means that the need for mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage funding needs to be provided by developed countries to developing countries. And that is the basis of why we go to these meetings, because the science of climate change from the convention is very clear that developed countries are responsible for the emissions of greenhouse gases that led to the catastrophic impacts of climate change in developing countries. So in other words, they build their economy on fossil fuel, and our economies are being destroyed by the use of the same fossil fuels. So we expect developed countries to be responsible for their historical emissions of greenhouse gases that are contributing to the losses and damages in our countries, both for mitigation and adaptation, as well as loss and damage. So we were going to COP29 with the high expectation that we'll get trillions of dollars that will pour into adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage financing. But this has fallen short of the outcome of the meeting. So we can come to the specifics there. But instead of getting $1.3 trillion, we got something like 300 billion. And we can talk about the quality of that. It's not the amount that matters here, but the quality of that funding is something that some of us are not very much happy with.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Damfa. Babukar, like I said in the intro, you led the Climate Action Network, Africa team to COP. What were you expecting from COP 20?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Aliu. And thank you for giving us this opportunity also to talk to the Gambians and the wider world. Of course, you're right. We led the Africa team and then the Africa group of the Climate Action Network to COP as activists who were very concerned with this year, which was Climate Finance Year, and we've dubbed it the Finance Year of COP. When we went with the anticipation and expectation that the developed countries who agreed to the calamities and catastrophes that they've had or they've done in climate-related issues, that they were going to be paying up for the climate finance and the climate disasters that they've caused to the developing countries. Again, like my brother said, Doctor, we've gotten a shock and disappointment with the excuses that they have given on both the side of the trillions we were demanding as developing countries, one from for the funding of adaptation, for the funding of mitigation and loss and damage that we've calculated and known that it was going to be 1.3 trillion that was expected from the developed nation whose actions in terms of industrialization, in terms of fossil fuel buildings that has been used to develop their countries and being used again to ruin our developing nations, to be able to use those historic catastrophe that they have done for us to be able to pay. Unfortunately, as we said, and we realize, we've seen them giving excuses of lacking funding or lacking money to be able to finance those activities. And the danger about those finance, we have also seen this COP that we had expected to be the finance COP to support loss and damage, to support mitigation and adaptation. We end up seeing fossil fuel lobbyists who were there advancing the usage, not even on phase out, but also advancing the usage of fossil fuel. Because as activists, we've also even get intels and information from our colleagues from other countries who have told us, even government delegates from the developed countries included fossil fuel lobbyists in their delegations. That shows the lack of goodwill, the lack of intent that they were coming with clean hand to support finance for the developing countries on the climate calamities that they've caused for us. Basically, we went with the expectation of getting finance, getting public finance for that matter, not loans, not private investment, but unfortunately, we could not receive that. So that's become disappointing. We'll discuss more on the intels and what had happened and things that we could do better as Africans or developing nations or people from the developed global south.
Thank you very much, Babukar. Let me now bring in my colleague here, Alaji Colonel Suare. I mean, as a journalist, as an environmental activist, you've attended COPs in the past. I think it was only this one that you couldn't make it to Baku. But are you surprised? From what you have heard from these two who were in Baku?
I am not surprised because looking at the COP setup, if you look at it, it starts from the Paris Agreement, then from there where you have a 100 billion pledge was given by developed countries, which was tasked on developed countries to compensate developing countries. The whole idea regarding climate change, if you look at it, is that 82% of emissions are done by just 10 countries. And if these countries are not obliged or are not willing to stand up on their commitment, it will keep dragging. Not even COP50 will help us get there. The damages are really faced by this the LDCs, and then it will keep coming. And to see them given a pledge of like almost 300 billion, it's just going to be like, yes, we will do it. But then when it comes, and I wouldn't be surprised to see that this dragon keeps going.
Let me now bring in Dr. Damfa. Like I said, I mean, you are a lead negotiator for the less developed countries. I mean, could you share with us, I mean, what challenges have you faced as a representative of, like I said, the LDCs in this in your these global negotiations?
Well, thank you very much, Alio, for that question. So the way we negotiate in this meeting is we negotiate as a bloc or as a group.
Yeah.
So the Gambia is part of 45 least developed countries on climate change. We call it the LDC group, which are the poorest and the most vulnerable communities to the impacts of climate change. And what that means, we are also part of other groups like the African Group of Negotiators, which is all of Africa, also included 34 of the LDCs are in Africa. So as a country, we have a country position in terms of what are the country priorities. And for the Gambia, it's generally on adaptation and resilience building and addressing the loss and damages the country faces as a result of climate change. You know that the Gambia, for example, we know from the science since 1996, By the end of this century, the capital city of our country could be underwater, which is significantly devastating. It means that the economy of the country is sinking if Banjul sinks. The coastline has been suffering from a lot of vulnerabilities to coastal erosions, right, due to sea level rise, and this has inundated coastal livelihoods and coastal assets and resources that our communities directly benefit from. So the Gambia prepares its position paper, and this also takes into account some of the inputs that come from the youth. As you know, that the Gambian youth are very much organized in what they call the ELCOI, which is the Youth Conference on Climate. So as a country, the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Natural Resources leads the delegation. And then this year, the Honorable Minister Rahi Jones Manjang, who led the delegation with a high-level delegation from government officials and other agencies that joined the team. And I have to give credit to the ministry because the ministry has done an extremely well-coordinated job in ensuring that we are organized while we are on the ground. And even before going, there was a meeting to prepare the negotiators. And while we were on the ground, we also had several country-level coordination meetings. So these coordination meetings help us to share knowledge, information, but also push forward some of the critical elements that are important to us as a country, but also to the least developed countries. So I am part of the lead adaptation negotiators for the least developed countries, mainly focused on what we call the national adaptation plans. So the Gambia has already benefited from a project, it's about 3 million from GCF, the Green Climate Fund, that is supposed to help the country to prepare its national adaptation plan. And as far as the plans are concerned, this particular plan, all countries and all parties are expected to submit their national adaptation plans by 2025, according to the GST outcome of last year. So the Gambia is on track, which means that by 2025, hopefully, the Gambia will prepare its first national adaptation plan and submit that. So as an LDC, what we keep talking about is not enough to develop plans. Gambia has done extremely well in developing plans. We have our long-term strategy, carbon strategy. We have our nationally determined contribution. We have our NADS. So we need funding to be able to implement these plans. So the biggest challenge, to answer your question, Ali, is that we're lacking what we call means of implementation in any of the negotiation rooms. And means of implementation in this context means access to affordable finance, technology transfer, and capacity building. You cannot build adaptive capacity and strengthen the resilience of any community without these three things. So in every negotiation room, we're talking about the provision of means of implementation, and this should be provided by the developed world, and there's always a resistance from the developed world counterpart to provide funding, technology, and capacity building for developing countries, particularly for the LDC. So the LDC position is always that we need more resources because we are the most vulnerable, and we don't want to leave any LDC behind because our resilient capacity is the lowest among all countries, our vulnerability is the highest, and which means that we are most susceptible to be devastated by climate shocks.
Interesting. Let me now bring in Babukar here. I mean, like I said, I mean, you were in Baku, I mean, of course, to lead the team, to ask for polluters to pay. I mean, I would just like to know from you your thoughts on the host, because I mean, so some right groups, I mean, say Azerbaijan actually just use the summit as a chance to greenwash what they would call, their crimes and human rights abuses. I mean, many say, I mean, most of Azerbaijan's, I mean, national income is from fossil fuel. What's your take?
Agreed, Aliu, and 100%. That is very true. The first thing that we started having with is the presidency. And of course, when we talk about the presidency, we talk about the process in which the leadership of the COP itself is going. At the beginning, when the president started saying, okay, you cannot ask us to phase out fossil fuel because it's a gift from God, started also criticizing other countries like France,
Yeah.
and then also having issues with even countries that were near to them. That tells you their bad will, like there was no goodwill in ensuring that there is transparency in the whole process. Again, even in the negotiation, compared to other countries, for example, in Egypt and Dubai, the weakness in leadership in even trying to negotiate or push certain information in the text, or the reluctance of putting those things in the text, tells you that the host country was not interested in most of these things that we're talking about. Of course, even countries like Italy benefits from the gas and oil from Azerbaijan, and they are the biggest contributor in terms of supplying countries within them in terms of fossil fuel. So it's of course just the name, it's of course just the process that they wanted to take out of host country, but they are not intending to leave the thing that they have built their wealth on, or to say, okay, we are accepting responsibility of the calamities we are causing. Again, what is very important to know there, for the first time, we are having 1,700 fossil fuel lobbyists as part of delegations of COP. What that means, we are talking about funding to solve the issues of adaptation, to solve the issue of mitigation and loss and damage, and we are having retaliation of fossil fuel lobbies
take everything.
Trying to get more business opportunities to advance their agenda. And the global politics is very clear in this developed nation, because their interest is how they could continue building their wealth on this fossil fuel, how they could build their wealth on coal, and all other extractive measures from natural resources that they are doing, to ensure that they build their country or continue building their countries and leaving the developing nations at the risk of dying of calamities of climate change. I'll give you an example. Africa contributes only 4% of the global emission. If we are contributing only that, why will you bring us funding of false solution on carbon credit? And we keep on saying as activists, carbon credits are not forms of financing. They are not financing. We don't need carbon credit for them to replace financing. We don't need loans for them to replace financing. We don't need private investment for them to replace financing. What we need is public funding, public finance from the monies that they generate to give to the developing countries for them also to build their countries. Like my brother doctor was saying about the mitigation that we have. The LDCs even boycotted and rejected the negotiations, them and the seats. It's as a result of the frustration that they had in this process. And this was a country that we've known marked with bad leadership, marked with a dictatorship, and all those things combined together, not valuing human rights. So it's, of course, you will not expect the good thing from them when we're talking about financing or funding climate change activities. So I think it's important we also know these countries that are involved in this process when it comes to the negotiations as well.
And Alaji, I mean, for you, I mean, do you think these summits are working then?
If you weigh it like whether they are working, yes, they are working. People are coming. It is to realize the globalization we all cry for. We want to come out together. We sit together and discuss. But then last year, when
is that enough?
It's not enough. But then I was challenged by someone, like, you know, when there is COP, there are protesters outside in there, and challenged me to say, you guys are fighting against carbon emissions and the like. How many of you got to the flight and came here? Which is in line with Article 7. We talk about carbon emissions and the like. So I was like to myself, wow, it's dangerous to sometimes listen to certain things which could influence some of the things you want to do. So the summit is doing well in terms of bringing people together, ideas together. But then if I look at it on the other side, I will align myself with what my brother Nyang is also saying, to quote from, it's more like giving and taking. Because at the end of the day, what they will even tell you is you need technology to get certain things done. And then those technologies that are coming to the global south, where we belong to, would be purchased from them. it's not even clear how are they going to provide this funding. So some of these, honestly speaking, it's going to be like merry-go-round. We will keep revolving in one orbit where there is no progress made, because we will be hearing ambitious figures like 300 billion. Woo, is very big. But then, is it going to address the damages? And if these funds are available, are they really going to address it? Are they capable? Where we are hearing almost every kind of movement claiming that they are affected. You talk about vegans, you talk about, I don't want to keep mentioning names out there, but then the summit will keep growing, it will keep growing, pledges will come, but then they respond to the ideas presented at this summit will be very, very weak.
And Doctor, I mean, from your own understanding, who determines which country gets what from this 300 billion that we are talking about, even though it's just a fraction of the total pledges being made over the years?
First of all, we need to understand that these are pledges.
Yeah, that's certain.
Second of all, we need to note that the source of the funding, the 300 billion, includes public, private, and council financing, from bilateral to multilateral. This is where the COP has failed in providing a definition of what is climate finance. Because now they are counting everything apparently into climate finance. So all of development finance is now fused into climate finance. So forget about your development finance, because now everything that is coming in development aid is counted as climate finance.
Okay.
So from noting that these are pledges, how do we ensure that the pledges are fulfilled? If we learn from the 100 billion that was committed in Copenhagen, by 2025, it was 2020 and then to 2025, we were not able to raise or mobilize this funding until recently. We were not able to make the commitment 100 billion up to 2025 until recently. But the legal experts also tell us, if there is anything to learn from the Copenhagen Accord of the 100 billion, it means that this actually doesn't mean 300 billion every year.
It has to be in
legally. It doesn't mean that. It means 300 billion by
2035.
2035.
Yeah. Oh.
Which means it could be cumulative.
1.5 million per year.
Yeah, they could do whatever, and then by 2035, as long as they reach 300 billion by 2035, then they could say we've met the goal.
Sure.
So there is a big gap here in terms of even moving beyond the 100 billion to maybe 200 billion, talk less of the 300. So before countries get access to the 300 billion, it takes a lot of time.
And lots of damages.
But I'll give you a direct example. Okay. Let me come to how we access these funds.
All right.
So we access these funds through different mechanisms. The UNFCCC itself has its financing mechanisms, we call them. So we have the GCF, the Green Climate Fund, we have the Global Environment Facility, we have the Adaptation Fund, we have the Least Developed Countries Fund. So we have the Lost and Damaged Fund. So there are different funds that countries can now put money towards. Like the US can say we'll put 100,000 or 100 billion. Not 100 billion. US will not do that.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Yeah. I mean, the point is that any country can commit money into any of these funds. Now, these funds are managed by an entity. For example, the Lost and Damaged Fund is managed by the World Bank. So the World Bank will now provide details about how countries can access the Lost and Damaged Fund, and there will be an application process, and
then they
will apply, different countries will apply, and then they will be rejected, some will have it. So there are lots of other details about access to the fund. I'll give you an example. In LDCs, including in the Gambia, each person receives less than $4 per person, each person less than $4 the whole year from climate finance compared to other regions like Africa or other developing countries, which can be from $8 to 90 something dollars. So Gambia is among the countries that receives the least amount of climate finance. And it's not just Gambia; it's also a lot of LDCs,
LDCs,
countries we call least developed countries.
Yeah.
But let me now bring in Babukar here. Babukar, I mean, you're far from Dr. Danfa talking about the Gambia being one of the countries that received the least as far as this climate financing is concerned. But how we manage and use these funds, are you impressed?
Yeah, that is very critical. I'll answer that, but also just to acknowledge the efforts that Doctor is saying on this funding, and I'm very much appreciating, because as a development finance student, these are things that interest me, and these are also the things that we fight for, because you see now they're adding development finance to climate finance, and he was trying to explain that, which is very true. It's not only climate financing activities, but even aid are now being incorporated into these things. Even grants are now being incorporated into climate finance. So this is what we are saying. And then when we were even doing a position paper as Africans, we mentioned clearly that we don't want them to include debt that is public debt or private debt or investment or any other thing that is not public financing. Because what they are doing currently is just playing with our minds, putting all the funds in one basket and calling it a name. He's quite right. When the 100 billion, we just received the commitment in 2022. So until recently, so you see now, even with this 300 billion, there's no guarantee that we will receive it by the 2035.
It's not even guaranteed.
So it was important that, this messages comes, and for us as activists who were in COP, this is why we are pressurizing our ministers to tell them they have the right to refuse. Because you see now, it's also the time that they have position, which we've seen and appreciated the efforts of the AGN, the Africa Group of Nations, who rejected the outcome. And that was showing also the solidarity with the African. So at least it was good that, my brother Doctor brought those things for people to understand and know that this climate financing and funding that they do not only include the climate, but also all other development finance things are now embedded in it.
But
coming back to the, us,
yeah.
As a country, to respond to your question, I think we have too much wasted when it comes to the limited and scarce resources that we have. Because we have seen environmental projects in this country. What impact is that environmental project bringing to the rightful people who it's benefiting? Let's say, for example, if you go to Sankandi, you see now the salt there is now taking over the country. What project do we have in this country that is supporting the people of Sankandi? What project do we have that is supporting mangrove restoration for mitigation? What do we have to do on adaptation, on smart agriculture? Where are these projects that we are having? So it's important that we also know those limited resources that we have, how are we utilizing them to benefit the people of this country? Not to use those resources or scarce resources to buy project vehicles or furniture or build offices. It is for the needs of the people, which should go directly to the people, so that $4 that Doctor is talking about is benefiting the people that definitely is directed to. In that, if we are not doing it, we'll be part of the countries that will go again, complain, have the same funds, and then come and waste it.
And Alaji, do you agree that we can still do more? We can still do better as a country?
We can still do better.
Despite the limited resources that we are receiving, like Dr. mentioned.
Yeah, we can do better if we don't put all our eggs in one basket, like to focus on the benefits or maybe the financial compensation we will receive from the UNCCC. Are we really setting track that will really help us to benefit if we don't only stay in there? We are demanding for compensations on what the major countries are doing, like the developed countries are doing to these developed countries. But we have seen forests were been a breakdown to residential areas. We have seen more, you call it deforestation. And still we're claiming outside that we want to get funding to fix these damages. We can still do better if we believe in that the climate damages we are having, we can improve it. But then, are we responsible? Is Africa contributing 4% of global emissions, and then we are facing more punishment? The financial benefits of it, I still think we will do little from it. Like you hear from Dr. Damfa that every Gambian per year is receiving $4. $4, you convert that is less than $500. That could be like a breakfast for somebody, or could be a day meal to provide a meal for someone just for a day. It is going to be very, very difficult, but then there are ways we could do. We could control the litterings and the like, but then this have no impact globally.
Doctor, earlier on you mentioned about the issue of United States contribution to climate, and I saw you, in fact, you were laughing about it. I mean, with now the return of Donald Trump as the president of the United States, you remember at some point he pulled out the Paris Agreement. I mean, he's coming back. What will this mean for, climate change, especially the COP?
Well, there is not much we can expect from the Trump presidency in terms of honoring and taking care of the historical responsibilities of the United States. Now, here I tell people that developing countries are not begging. We're not begging the United States to give us money. We are asking the United States to take care of its moral and legal responsibility. Because this is a very important point. What makes climate finance different from development finance, you can call it aid, charity. Climate finance, from what we know, is not aid, it's nothing. And Gambia is not asking for aid, and we're not asking for charity. We are asking for debt that the United States, European Union, and Canada and all these developed countries have developed as a result of their extraction of fossil fuel that leads to this devastation that our communities are facing. So we are asking them legally and morally to see this thing as the right thing to do. So I tell Americans, whether the Trump administration fails to honor and take account of these issues I've mentioned, it is every American's responsibility to understand that we have a role to play in this.
And Babukar, do you expect a surprise from Trump?
Well, I'll just echo on what Doctor said. No surprise at all. But again, as he rightly said, we are not begging. It's a moral responsibility of the historical responsibilities that they took. So it's not a matter of begging. And it has even been alleged that Argentina's withdrawal from the COP was as a result of that they had with Trump or the presidency in America. So that alone is telling you America's unwilling to come forward to say that, look, we definitely have the moral responsibility to say we have caused these damages, we have used fossil fuel for so long, we have been doing this, we have dug pipelines in everywhere, and now it's our time for us to fund. And us as activists, we're also saying it is high time that these numbers be clear to people. 2 days ago, Greenpeace has released a document showing that $2.2 trillion are subsidized on fossil fuel. But they're still claiming that they don't have 1.3 trillion to finance climate calamities. So you see the double standard in those things. You can continue subsidizing fossil fuel, but don't want to put in money on the damages that you're causing. Again, we as activists are also seeing the damages they cause in these countries that are worse. For example, in Sudan, the war in Palestine, the war in Lebanon. We have seen how these developed countries have invested monies and pumped it in those countries for destruction. And those destruction are causing climate calamities for the people within those areas, which also hinder their rights to live, their rights to dignity, their rights to farming, their rights to water, and their rights to access to health facilities, which are all issues of human rights. And it's as a result of the funding that they are putting in those wars. So if you can fund war, why can't you fund climate issues? If you can fund destruction in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Sudan, and other countries, why, of course, can't you put those same money to put it there. So for America, we are not begging. For America, for any other, for EU, we are not begging. For Canada, we are not begging. We are telling them that you have to pay and pay up now. You owe the global south, you owe the developing countries funding for you to pay, and you must pay it.
And
this would only drag me to say, when we talk about climate funding, can't we shift to something different? That is to preach the reality behind the emissions. Using this code, like it was earlier said by Famara and the like, it's more like industrialization to build. And if we are agreeing to terms that have made this countries great, and we are here stopping those activities now, we just want to follow them, pay us, you are damaging, pay us, you could pay us, keep damaging. Are we really going to achieve that we are looking for? It's absolutely no. This is just like to say, inviting a child to come to you, give him a slap, you give him a sweet. Come next, I slap you, I give you a sweet. That is what is really happening. Imagine emission of 82% to 84%. Then I am here telling you that I really want to do this. So it's more like paying us to make us a dumping zone, paying us to destroy our climate, paying us, causing lots of severe pain to us, wherein it's not even equivalent to 1% of those payments they should be doing. So for the US policies with regard to climate funding, I know little, so I would want to excuse myself to talk about it. Okay. But then all I know is that if I would talk, I wouldn't count US as a country, but I will put them together as a major, as a developed country. It is so many countries involved in there, wherein I have even read an article where a particular train is abandoned from a country because they believe that it emits too much of carbon, and then this train was sold to one country, and the country is a developing country. So
I understand we're running out of time. Let me just bring in
Ali, just quickly, let me assist Alaji also. Okay, Alaji, that is why the analogy of the sweet you're giving is very interesting. That is why we also have the just transition, and that is also going to address the issues of those bringing the person to come and say, Africa, of course, will not accept to be the dumping side, but you see we have the just transition, and in the just transition there are framework that are laid out to be able to put that. We also have the renewable energy support. You know, you can also go into renewable energy, and in the renewable energy we could see how best, you know, we use renewables instead of using fossil fuel and coal to light up, something like that.
And finally, let me just bring in Dr. Damfa here. We're running out of time. Doctor, I mean, looking ahead to the COP30 in Brazil, do you think there's a need for any COP again, considering what has transpired? I mean, or with all these pledges, commitments, it seems, you know, we are not.
No, I tell people this meeting is one of the most important meetings the world contains.
All right.
We cannot underestimate the importance of this meeting.
Sure.
It is multilateralism, it's global solidarity, and it is needed. Because there is no global government, and then there is a global crisis. When you emit here from the United States, it circulates in the air, it affects the whole planet, it impacts villages in the Gambia. So we must talk to people who are emitting here. So the climate meetings are important and should continue. What we should do as a country and as developing countries is to better prepare ourselves to negotiate well with our counterparts from the developed world. We are not at the same level of preparation when we go into these meetings. We have one agenda item, and developed countries have 4 or 5 people that are focused on one agenda item, and then you have one person from Gambia who's focused on maybe 3 or 4 different agenda items. How can you
negotiate for all of this? It's not possible.
Okay. And negotiation is not just the day or the week of the COPs. Negotiation starts before. You have to prepare, you have to study, you have to cite reports, and these are all substantial evidence that solidify your position when you are negotiating.
Okay.
So I will be now heading towards recommendations, Ali. I know you don't have time.
Yes, just briefly, please. We're running out of time now.
Briefly on recommendations. The ministry is doing well. I encourage the ministry to continue with the support of bilateral and multilateral international partners to support building capacity of Gambian negotiators to better prepare us to negotiate well with our counterparts. The second thing I will give a red flag to The ministry should watch out for companies that are coming to exploit the carbon market.
Yes.
The carbon market is another form of climate colonialism.
Yes.
We must make sure that we are paid properly for a ton of carbon. For example, they go to some countries, they pay $1,
Yeah.
$3 for a ton
Yeah.
of carbon.
Yeah,
Here
the-
in the United States,
the-
they
the-
pay $18.
Doctor, I know you're making very valid recommendations there, but I'm told we're running out of time completely. Thank you so much, Dr. Famara Damfa, who's joining us from the United States of America. He's a lead scientist and center director for the Natural Capital Project, the Earth Economy Modulars at the University of Minnesota's Department of Applied Sciences. He also represents the Gambia and 45 least developed countries as a lead negotiator on adaptation matters. By the way, Famara and I are former classmates, and we burnt the midnight candle together. It was good to have you, Famara, on this program. Wow. And of course, Babukar Nyang, who actually led the Climate Action Network team to COP to demand for climate financing and justice, who was joining us from the capital, Dakar of Senegal. And in the studio here, I have Alaji Cherno Suare, a journalist and climate activist. It was good to have you in the program, gentlemen. Well, viewers, with that, we bring an end to this week's edition of your weekly State of Affairs program. Do join me next week. Until then, bye-bye from me and the entire team.